אוי אוי כל דוי שלא נבנה בית המקדש ביומו כהילי נחרב ביומו אוי אוי כל דוי שלא נבנה בית המקדש ביומו כהילי נחרב ביומו.
Hello everyone, this is the sixth in the series of the FLIMSY 3 weeks, and as we're getting closer to Shabbos, let's talk about 3 different scenarios on Shabbos that can happen during the 3 weeks. That indeed shows exactly what we've been speaking about all week. Number 1, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that during this period of time, you should try not to say שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה, thank you God for keeping me alive to this time, and therefore try not to buy new clothing that you have to make a שהחיינו on, and just to try not to buy new fruit that you have to make שהחיינו on. Comes along the Magen Avraham and says that the reason for this, based on the Ari, is, and I quote, it's a time, a very harsh time of poranut, of harshness and terrible things that happened for the Jewish people, and therefore it's inappropriate to say, God, thank you for keeping me alive to bring me to this period of time. Well, comes along the Gra, who doesn't hold back punches even from the Shulchan Aruch, says, Chumra yeterahi, this is a wild Chumra. How can this, namely this period of time of the 3 weeks, be more stringent than a guy who just heard that his father died? And what is the halacha when you hear that your father died? The halacha is clear. Meit aviv, if your father died, mevarech dayana emet. But hayalo mamon, if you're about to inherit a big inheritance, then imen lo achim, if you don't have any brothers and you're the only one, you say shechianu, and if you have others, then you say atov ametiv. So says the Gra, how can it be that during this period of time it's going to be more stringent than if you actually heard that your father died? The actual day that you heard your father died, you could say shehechianu. So how can it be now you can't say shehechianu? Comes along the Mishnah Berurah and says, I have an idea for you. Al kein b'Shabbos en lachmir b'zeh. Indeed, the Mishnah Berurah comes along and says, on Shabbos you can be mekel. He's basically quoting the Levush, the Nirali Shabbatot Shebentayim, mutar levarech shechianu apri chadash taham aleh al shulchano kesehudat shlomo ve'eno mechaser davar. After all, on Shabbos you have a big meal, and even those that have a custom not to eat meat during the 3 weeks, eat meat on Shabbos. If you have a custom not to eat meat during the 9 days, you eat meat on Shabbos, even if it's Erev Tisha B'Av. So therefore, on Shabbos you can make shechianu freely. And indeed, the Magen Avraham also says, Ubishabat Share, quoting the Mate Moshe. So scenario number 1 is very, very simple. Can you make a shechianu? Is this a terrible period of time that you shouldn't say, God, thank you for keeping me alive? Or maybe it's not a terrible period of time. It's a time in which we do mourning practices, but it's not a terrible period of time, going back to the flimsiness of the 3 weeks. Scenario number 2 has to do with Shabbos, called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbos right before Tisha B'Av, which comes out during the 9 days. And this year it will be a day before Tisha B'Av. Comes along the Ramah and brings a wild idea. Even on Shabbos, you shouldn't wear your regular Shabbos clothing. You should only wear partial Shabbos clothing. And indeed, the Gra again comes and says, Zoi Chumra Be'alma. This is a Chumra, not even Yetera, wild, but Be'alma, out of nowhere. Why? Because even if you're not allowed to wear laundered clothing during the 9 days, you're allowed to even do laundry for Shabbos. And indeed, if Tisha B'Av happened to fall out on Shabbos, and we pushed it off to Sunday, on Shabbos we would eat meat and cholent and drink wine. So how can it be that we wouldn't wear Shabbos clothing? Scenario number 3 has to do with Torah learning on Erev Tisha B'Av. So this year, Erev Tisha B'Av will be on Shabbos. Comes along the Ramah and says, there's a minhag not to learn the things that you're not allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av already on Erev Tisha B'Av. We won't go into the reasons why he pushed it back a few hours. And therefore he says, Im chal b'Shabbat, if indeed it comes out on Shabbos like it does this year, ein omrim Pirkei Avos. You don't say Pirkei Avos even if you say Pirkei Avos every single week. Well, indeed, the Mishnah Berurah saw this, says it can't be Medina, this cannot be a halacha. The hamutar b'erev Tisha of Medina kol chamesh inuyim. You're allowed to eat, you're allowed to drink, you're allowed to wear leather shoes. How can it be? Torah learning is going to be something we're going to push back even to Erev Tisha B'Av. And therefore, he tries to explain the minhag and say, well, you can learn the stuff that you can learn on Tisha B'Av, so why dafka go for the things that you can't learn? Well, quite frankly, many have attacked this minhag of the Ramah, including the Taz. Starting with the words, indeed, I have a great problem with it. If indeed you're allowed to eat meat and drink wine on Shabbos, then how can it be that you're not allowed to learn Torah on Shabbos? And therefore he says anything that's kavua, like you go to a shir, it's a daf yomi, or a regular shir Shabbos afternoon, you should do and not cancel it. But once again, the Gra comes along and says, Chumra yeterahi. This is a wild, needless Chumra. Because on this Shabbos, before Tisha B'Av, we don't do anything that we're not allowed to do on Tisha B'Av. We ultimately wash our hands normally, we normally eat and drink, and therefore he doesn't understand where this comes from. So, if you saw one Gra, you'd say fine. You saw two, you'd say maybe. You see three, it must be that the Gra has an opinion here, as does those that disagree. And that is, of course, is this a flimsy period of time or a time of Paranut? If you say this is a time of Paranut, this is on the calendar as a terrible time for the Jewish people, then I understand why, even if it's Shabbos, you wouldn't wear your normal Shabbos clothing. Even if it's Shabbos, you would defray from your learning if it's Erev Tisha B'Av, because the period of time dictates as such. Anytime a Yontiv comes out on Shabbos, we have to make certain rules and regulations to both celebrate Yontiv and ensure the laws of Shabbos. Same thing here. We're in a terrible period of time, but it's also Shabbos. We have to try and balance them both. But if you don't say it's a terrible period of time, because it's going to change, God willing, into a Yontiv. And therefore, the only thing we do is what we call nihugei avelut. We actually do customs of mourning. Well, that would be true all week, but not on Shabbos. And therefore, it says the Gra, not once, not twice, but thrice. All of these things are wild chumras. Number one, not to make a שהחיינו on Shabbos. Yes, we're not happy with this period of time, but it's only customs of mourning, quite frankly. And therefore, you could say, thank you for bringing me to this period of time. One day it's going to be a Yontif. Number two, you can learn freely, as you would do any Shabbos. And number three, most importantly, you can wear your Shabbos clothing. And therefore, I believe that we see clearly that there's two ways of looking at this period of time. The Ramah, at least in the two examples I brought, indeed comes along and says, this is a terrible period of time, and therefore you have to act accordingly, even on Shabbos. But many have disagreed and said, no, we do nihugei avelut. We do acts of mourning, from not shaving to not taking haircuts, and then we're going to go up a little bit when the 9 days come, and then you go up even more on Tisha B'Av. But no, it is not a terrible period of time per se, because this period of time will change for the better. And therefore, when a Shabbos comes along, then indeed, we forget about all this, and we can, for a few hours, 25 in number, actually think what this period of time is going to be like, when indeed things are going to be perfect. And in that period of time, there will be no restrictions on Torah learning. There'll be no restrictions on your dress code for Shabbos, and of course there'll be no restrictions on saying שהחיינו. So as we're about to get into Shabbos, I would say this is a true me'ein olam haba, in the sense of we're now going to taste a little bit what it's like to indeed have a 3 weeks without the mourning practices.
Ya